Hi, I'm Joe Feeks, editor of Pig Health Today, and with me is Dr. Brian Payne. He is a technical service veterinarian from Northern Illinois, and he's with Zoetis. Nice to have you here.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
The pork industry certainly has a lot of opportunity, but it has its share of problems and challenges. And I guess I'd like to try to frame this around disease problems, because we are Pig Health Today. You're a big advocate of what you call root cause problem solving. Yeah. And I know it's not an original concept, but I'd still like for you to, so we get everybody on the same page here, what exactly is root cause problem solving?
Sure, absolutely. Well, if I back up a little bit in my career, we were taught in school how to solve problems, and we're taught very specific diseases and then how to solve them. When you come out to the real world, you're presented a problem, but you don't know what the disease is. And far too often we see a clinical sign, we jump right to, it's this disease. But it could be one of numerous things. It may be that disease, maybe that a vaccine didn't work, or an antibiotic is needed, or it's just that there's compliance around one of the protocols. Many different causes of disease can be there. If we seek out what the root cause is, we can then solve the problem.
So when I think about root cause for disease management, I start thinking diagnostics, or certainly consulting with my veterinarian and so forth. It sounds like you're digging deeper than that.
Yeah, I think so. If we just look at the problem on the surface and say it's a bacteria, can we put an antibiotic towards it and solve it for that individual pig or those pen of pigs or that barn? Sure, we can. But where did that bacterium come from? Is there something that we can do in our management practices at the sow farm to prevent it? Is there something with a vaccine that we can prevent the problem in the first place?
Part of this is there's a program or a process called DMAIC, which is define, measure, analyze, improve, control. It sounds logical, it sounds sensible, but how do you apply that to everyday pork production?
Sure. When I first was learning or being taught this process, we call it the DeMeo process.
DeMeo.
Yes, and it's a very standardized process. It's used in businesses throughout the world, just not in health. It's also used in manufacturing. For me, it's a fantastic process, but it's very difficult for me to take the DeMeo process onto a farm and make it apply on this farm visit, and then the farm visit down the road and the farm visit down the road. It's hard for me to train others on that. And so what I was taught later through going through an executive veterinary program at U of I, University of Illinois, is root cause analysis. It's a very simplistic way to take a look at the root causes of problems, list them all out, and then have a great conversation with the producer or another veterinarian.
So give me an example of how this would work. Let's say we're seeing symptoms of what could be the PRRS virus, for example. How would you tackle it?
Sure. So the problem, as you stated, and this is usually the producer's problem, I'm having clinical signs to this disease, they put it, but it may be it's a cough. So maybe they have a coughing problem. That's the primary problem they want to sort out. And then we look at different options. So we look at different diseases. What are all the differential diagnoses that it could be? It could be flu, there could be PRRS involved, it could be mycoplasma. So those are the diseases. Now we have to look at what the processes that are already in place to help prevent those diseases. Maybe it's biosecurity that allowed PRRS to come in. Maybe it was that the sow should have been vaccinated for flu, but they didn't get vaccinated. So one of the problems, the root cause may have been there was a protocol in place, but yet it didn't get implemented right. And so it didn't get implemented. We go back one step further. Why didn't it? Maybe it wasn't, somebody didn't order the product. Maybe the employee didn't want to give the product. And so you look at why an employee wouldn't want to give a product. You look at the root cause. Maybe they weren't motivated to. Maybe they didn't have the instructions in the right language. Maybe they were brand new and weren't given the instructions from their manager. So ultimately that cough down in the finisher could have been all the way back to a sow farm, and the manager simply not explaining to a new employee that this vaccine should be given.
It does get complicated, but the pork industry can be complicated in the sense that you never have just one or two infections. This is
sure.
a species of lots of co-infections. So if you're trying to identify a root cause, I mean, it really gets to be plural, doesn't it, pretty quickly?
Yeah.
Root causes.
Right.
How do you how do you corral all that?
I think it's through a lot of discussions, and it's really sitting and planning with everyone that's involved on what the approach to the troubleshooting is going to be. Sometimes we go just directly down the diagnostic route and we may find co-infections, but then we can spend a lot of money either on antibiotics or on vaccines. But until we find the root cause, we may be just throwing this money and throwing this time at a problem and continuing to have this problem on and on until we fix the root cause. I think one thing that's interesting, there's a famous quote, and I'm not going to be able to quote it specifically, but it talks about for years and years we can throw time and we can throw money at poverty. But until we really look at what causes poverty, we're never going to solve it. And it's the same thing on a farm. We can throw a lot of money and a lot of time at diagnostics, at antibiotics and vaccines, but until we find the root cause, we're going to continue to deal with it.
Can you walk me through how could a pork producer identify that root cause? I mean, there are lots of people they can call on, their veterinarian, their nutritionist, the feed mill, talking to their partners, their spouse, whomever. Yeah. But how do you boil off the fat and really get to the root cause?
Sure. What I use, I think everyone can use it. I call it a fishbone diagram. You put your problem on the right-hand side and you kind of draw a line, and you draw lines off of this. And you force yourself to think on every aspect of production, whether it's health, whether it's the management at the sow farm, whether it's genetics, whether it's environment. And you force yourself to fill out that sheet in a quick amount of time, 5-10 minutes, and going, what could genetics or environment play, what role could it play into this problem? And once you actually sit down and you write all of that out, you kind of step back and say, okay, I was biased and I thought it would be this problem, but it's possible. I need to really think about all of these different other variables.
And when you look at something like that, though, should you be doing this on your own? Is it a real soul-searching moment? Or is this a time to bring in other business associates or your consultants, such as your veterinarian?
I think you bring in, it's a collaboration. It's a collaboration between everyone that has come in contact with those pigs or had a role in order to produce those pigs. It could be the maintenance person if it's a ventilation issue. It could be the manager. It could be the employee. I think you really need to, the bigger the problem, the more people you should have in the room in order to help fix it.
Now, for you to be such a strong advocate of this, I imagine you've seen some tangible results, people taking this approach. Without naming names, can you tell us about a farm that comes to mind that was having a particular issue? Maybe they thought it was one thing and it turned out to be another, but they used this approach.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a farm last week. The problem is that the pigs weren't going to market fast enough. And so we sat down and we went through this process and said, what are all the variables? Could it have been the boar that they have been using? Maybe the change in boar line decreased the number of days to market. Could it have been disease? Could it have been diseases that could be prevented with antibiotics, or excuse me, with vaccines, or should antibiotics be applied? Through putting this out, we were able to make 2 different interventions, and we're going to monitor those interventions to see if there's a solution. In the end, we believe that through control of PRRS and ileitis, through vaccination, that they'll be able to get a decrease in number of days to market.
So in many respects, it's all about maybe slowing down. I mean, we're all living in a world where we're staring into our mobile devices and so forth and running 100 miles an hour, but sometimes you just need to call time out and take a deep breath and say, what am I doing? And try to have a better understanding of what these root causes are.
I think that's a great way. Slow down, and so it's a slower approach to your initial approach, but in the end, you may get to the root cause. Hopefully you get to the root cause in a quicker fashion with less time and less money.
It sounds like a good plan. We could probably all do that in our lives and be better for it. Huh?
Absolutely.
You bet. We've been talking to Brian Payne. He's a technical service veterinarian for Zoetis. Brian, thanks for walking us through that.
Yeah.